It's a special edition of This Week in Pro Football as the Eagles prepare for a Thursday night divisional showdown with the 7-3 Commanders. ESPN's Sal Paolantonio and Keim in Washington will join us to talk about the game, how the Commanders turned it around, and how Philly got its offense going again. Gary Myers on the long and painful road of the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Giants, and the New York Jets, and how they got where they are right now. Justin Mark and Bill Reinhard will join us later on to give you all of your Week 11 props, picks, starts, and sits. That is all right now on a very special edition of This Week in Pro Football.
It's time for This Week in Pro Football, a deep dive into the key issues and marquee matchups in the National Football League. For the next 60 minutes, we invite you to sit back or lean in with host Pat Callahan as we preview the week's Eagles matchup, big games, breaking stories, and all news NFL. It's This Week in Pro Football, right now on JAKIB Media Sports.
Hello, everyone. Pat Callahan joining you from the JAKIB Sports Studios for week number 11 of This Week in Pro Football. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. We've got an all-star cast coming in tonight to preview the Thursday night game between Philadelphia and Washington and to look around the National Football League. Sal Powell will be with us in just a few minutes. John Keim from ESPN will also join us near the bottom of the hour to talk about the Commanders and how they have turned the tide from a 30-year slide in the post-Joe Gibbs era to be on the just on the verge of a playoff berth in 2024. As I said, we'll also have your usual depravity with Justin Mark joining me from SGPN to talk about your props and picks for Week 11, and Bill Reinhard will discuss your starts and sits for fantasy football. Terrible week last week unless you had Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, or, of course, the usual Lamar Jackson insanity, at least right up until December. So we'll do all that, and then Gary Myers will talk with us because, hey, Gary's your expert on the Giants and the Cowboys, and also he lives outside of New York, so we can talk about the Jets and just three of the most shockingly bad franchises in the NFL this year. So we got a lot to do in the next 90 minutes or so, and look forward to you joining me throughout. A good week this week, some big games this week. The Philadelphia-Washington game, obviously a big game, and then two other titanic games on the schedule. We'll get into the schedule in a little while, but two that just jump out at you. Maybe three. We'll throw a third one in because Sal's going to be out there, and that is Green Bay at Chicago. Packers off a bye and coming off a bad home loss to Detroit. The Bears, meanwhile, just unbelievable. Since that Hail Mary that Washington thrown, the Bears have not scored an offensive touchdown. So they got to get the ship righted there. But the two other big matchups, Kansas City travels to Buffalo, Chiefs 9-0. Buffalo has a statement to make. That will be a big game. And the other one is also in the AFC. Baltimore traveling, I should say, to Pittsburgh. This is a huge game, not just in the AFC North, but in the AFC playoff picture. So a lot of stuff to talk about for the National Football League for week number 11. No better guy on the planet to talk to about it than this gentleman, ESPN's national correspondent, the host of the NFL Matchup Show and the author of How Football Explains America, and a guy who's about to be inducted into the National Italian-American Hall of Fame Friday night in Chicago, Sal Paolantonio. Sal, how you doing?
Pat, that was a great introduction, and you got some jam-packed show and a special edition of This Week in Pro. Right. Pat, you cannot preempt This Week in Pro Football. Cannot happen.
No, try as they might, Sal. Yep. I will make it to the airwaves.
Yes.
Okay. You and I
and I'll be right there with you every single step of the way.
Deeply appreciate that. Congratulations on that induction into that Italian-American Hall of Fame. Good for you. You've had a hell of a run. And something tells me it's not over yet, but that's going to be a great night in Chicago Friday.
Yeah. ESPN colleagues, family, friends. It's going to be big. Jim Porter, the president and chairman of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, is coming to Chicago to make the presentation to me. So I really wish my dad was alive, he would have got a kick out of it, Pat. He really would have.
Is Jim Porter now the guy who knocks on the doors?
Yes, he's the guy who knocks on the doors.
All right, well, no
So
doubt.
I'm close. It's not quite a knock, Pat. But
I was going to say now, you haven't seen the last of Jim Porter.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
So that's good for you. Good for you, Sal. And then you're out there, you're covering Packers-Bears on Sunday after you do Eagles-Commanders Thursday night, right?
Yes. The Eagles-Commanders is a very intriguing game. It's such a great game to start off a jam-packed Week 11. Yeah. You have these two teams separated by basically a half a game, a team that was red hot until the Steelers, dropped that little dime on them in the fourth quarter at home. I was there when it happened. I was on the air with Steve Levy. We couldn't believe that it happened and the way the Steelers came back and won that game. So there are a couple of trends to look at with the Washington Commanders right now that I think tilt the game towards the Eagles.
All right. Well, before you do that, let me do a little good, bad, and ugly with you.
Okay, let's go. Yeah.
And sorry, but Xander, if you'll bring up that schedule, the standings. Thank you very much. We'll do that. All right, Sal, give me your comments. There's some shotgun comments from Sal Paolantonio. The good last week, Sal. The Chiefs and the Lions do what winning teams do, right? They were eminently losable games, but when you've got a good team, you find a way to win games the way they did, right?
Yeah, that was what Dan Campbell said after the game, the head coach of the Lions, Pat. Dan Campbell said, when you don't have your best day and you still win the game, that's the mark of a good team. That's the sign that you have a good football team. Yep. If you have that kind of resiliency and determination and you play fourth quarters. As for the Kansas City Chiefs, Pat, the Chiefs have come from behind in 8 of their 9 wins. 8 of their 9 wins, and 7 of their 9 wins are by 1 score. It is a 1-score league. Yep. That is a theme that we have harped on here on this program. And more games have been decided by 1 score, 3, 6, or 7 points at this point in the NFL season than any time in pro football history. We are in a 1-score league. And if you have a team like the Chiefs or the Lions who can stay alive to the end, they will find a way to beat you, Pat.
Yep, that's right. You mentioned in previous show, Denver was coming on. They obviously were. They could have won that game, but that's what good teams do. They blocked that kick. I'll tell you, if that guy didn't block the kick, I think there were 2 other Chiefs who were going to block it. So that's what good teams do. And I wanted to mention, too, in terms of good teams, Sal, you just mentioned you were there. The Steelers all of a sudden get to 7-2 with a quality road win, right?
Super quality road win. The thing about the Steelers is they're sneaky consistent. So the Washington Commanders were playing ferocious, energized defense on their front 4 the entire game. I was just shocked by how good they had looked in the game, but yet the Steelers scored a touchdown in each quarter. They had a touchdown drive in all 4 quarters, Pat. And that's really what Russell Wilson used to do in Seattle. Russell Wilson, relied on a run game and a good defense, and he would score enough points to win. And when he dropped that ball in the end zone, in the corner of the end zone to Mike Williams, that was something we have seen from Russell Wilson many times before, to trust his receiver, put it in a spot and go get it.
Yeah. Russell's starting to look a little bit like the previous iteration of Russell Wilson.
Yes.
So the Steelers are going to be like, and when I talked about it at the Open, that's a big, big game in the AFC North on Sunday. Ravens at Steelers. Sal, a little bit of the bad from week number 10. And this is the mirror image of what we just talked about, Chiefs and Lions. And that is the Falcons and the Texans are good teams who, Sal, I don't think have the maturity or just the knowledge, if you will, of how to win games that they should win. And I think that's what happened to both of them Sunday.
Yeah, well, both of them luckily play in bad divisions. Yeah. So it'd be really hard for both of them not to make the playoffs and not to win a division. Right. So I would say right now they're bad. They're trending into the bad. And, if Houston gets some players back, they'll be pretty good. But the AFC is so loaded, Pat. They're not going to beat Buffalo. They're not going to beat Kansas City. They're not going to beat Pittsburgh. They're not going to beat Baltimore in the playoffs. They're just not.
All right. I can tell you right now, Sal, the Houston Texans will host the early Saturday game in the wild card weekend in January. That is the AFC South window for the initial wild card weekend game. Sal, the other bad thing I wanted to mention, close to my heart here, the Rams just gacked up a loss Monday night. You know, Sal, outside of their 2 wins against San Francisco and Minnesota, the Rams have scored 7 offensive touchdowns in 7 games. I don't know. Matthew Stafford is in a bit of a slump right now, and they may have played themselves out of the playoff picture Monday night.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Pat. And they looked bad offensively. Lisa Salters interviewed McKay and Sean McVay, rather, and at halftime, and she asked him, "How do you get your offense going?" And he really didn't have an answer. So I don't think he has an answer right now, and it's sad because he's probably got the Defensive Rookie of the Year on his football team. I mean, Mitchell for the Eagles has been good, but Verse has been fantastic.
Verse has been great, right?
Yeah, he's been great. And, they're wasting, I think, a very good defensive unit. And I don't understand it. I really don't. He's a good coach. Stafford's a good quarterback. But Stafford was just holding on to the ball way too long.
Yeah. Sal, the ugly from week number 10, we don't have to search very hard for this, okay? The Cowboys are a complete train wreck right now. And then the other thing I'd like you to comment on, the Bears, who you're going to see Sunday, no touchdowns in 2 weeks. They have ground to a complete halt. And New York football is world-class bad right now, Sal.
Yeah, you're going to have Gary on a little bit later, Gary Myers, who knows both of those New York teams real well, and he knows the Dallas Cowboys, and he'll give you a detailed look at what's going on with those teams. But I think it comes down to, okay, you've got an injured quarterback in Dallas, you got a bad quarterback in the Giants, and you got an aging quarterback with the Jets. You can't win football games in the NFL like that. I don't understand what these people were thinking. And Dallas is bad in all 3 phases. I said that to you last week.
All right.
And, the Eagles covered for the first time in a long time. They went on the road and covered and won in Dallas for the first time in a long time. So they are bad in all 3 phases, but it all comes down to the quarterback. And you got a lame duck head coach in both the Giants and the Cowboys. I don't think Dable's coming back, even John Mara said he was. Even though John Mara said he was going to keep him, I don't think it's going to happen. And you got an interim coach with the Jets. If you have that situation at the 2 pivotal positions, head coach and quarterback, you got problems.
Now you're right. You got a lame duck really in all 3 of them because there's no way Mike McCarthy's going to last in Dallas at the expiration of his deal.
You know what can save Dallas? Deion Sanders. Bring him into there.
How about that? There you go. All right. Sal Pao, stay with me, please, because when we get back, I want to now look at this Thursday night game, Philadelphia and Washington. You mentioned some trends that you've been looking at, and I'm very anxious to hear them. We'll do that next with Sal Paolantonio on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.
Welcome back. We've got another exciting play underway at KennedyAuto.com.
That's right. At KennedyAuto.com, you can browse their entire inventory from home.
The customer is scrolling hundreds of Ford, Mazda, and Subaru vehicles right at his fingertips.
He made his selection and got a bottom line price set directly to his email. He could go all the way.
And the deal is good, all without leaving his couch. Incredible. KennedyAuto.com. Enjoy your ride.
Discover the essence of true community banking with First Bank, your trusted partner across Eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Their network of branches brings you convenient access to dedicated personal bankers who understand your unique needs. At First Bank, you're not just a customer, you're a valued member of the community. Additionally, they are excited to announce the opening of 2 new branches in Media, Pennsylvania and Trenton, New Jersey, bringing their personalized banking services even closer to you. Connect with any member of the team today at their Westchester office, conveniently located at 849 Paoli Pike, or call them at 484-881-3800. First Bank is an equal opportunity lender and member FDIC.
Johnny Apple's Restaurant and Bar opened in 2001 and for over 20 years has been serving great food and good times to Bucks County residents, friends, and family. Ideally located at 184 Buck Road in Holland, Johnny Apple's offers a terrific array of steaks, seafood, and daily specials. They also host private parties and affairs of any size. For excellent food, great company, and a relaxed lunch or dinner, check out Johnny Apple's Restaurant at 215-953-9900 or at johnnyapplesrestaurant.com.
All right, welcome back here. This week in pro football, Pat Callahan joining you. Please give me a follow, too, on X at TWIPF. Pat, if you're so inclined, I'd appreciate that. And back with this gentleman, Sal Paolantonio, from the NFL Matchup Show and ESPN. Sal, you mentioned a couple of trends that you've been looking at relative to this game. Thursday night, Washington at Philadelphia. What do you see?
Well, Pat, I think when you go back and you look at the loss to the Steelers, Jaden Daniels did not have a good game. He completed 50% of his passes, which is low for him, and he averaged fewer than 6 yards per attempt, and he couldn't find really much room to scramble as a runner. That's been a growing trend in the last couple of weeks. Teams, I think, are doing a really good job. The Steelers were one of them, of bottling him up in the pocket. Now, T.J. Watt didn't have any sacks or hits until the fourth quarter, but that's because they were really doing a good job of corralling him in the pocket. They play man coverage with two deep, spy, and allowing that four-man rush to get home. And I think that is beginning to disrupt and force Jaden Daniels to be patient. So that's a difficult combination for a rookie quarterback. If you can lock down Terry McLaurin, like I expect them to do with Quinyon Mitchell, and you can use a spy, and I expect Cooper DeJean to be a spy on Jaden Daniels, like the Steelers did, you can have success against this Commanders offense. Now, defensively, the Commanders' quarterback passer rating for opposition quarterbacks right now is 5th worst in the NFL.
Yeah.
So you can throw on them. That's why Russell Wilson threw on them.
Right.
And the other teams all have a losing record in the bottom 5.
Right.
They're the only team with a winning record that is in the bottom 5 in opposing quarterback passer rating. You can throw on them.
And the Washington rush defense, Sal, is 28th in the league per game, 143 yards a game. Mm-hmm. So when the Eagles have the ball, Sal, I mean, are you going to get it? You see a healthy dose of Saquon here, or do you think? Just talk about that Eagle offense for a minute, if you would. Obviously, they're starting to click now. They get Dallas Goedert back. Where do you see Philadelphia concentrating in this game Thursday night?
Well, notwithstanding the first half of last game against Dallas, where they made several mistakes, including the quarterback, the thing that you see about this offense is the second half, they get better.
All right.
During this 5-game winning streak, Pat, Jalen Hurts has gotten better in the second half than in the first half. And they grind you down because they're so multifaceted. When A.J. Brown plays, and he's playing tomorrow night, they're 6-0. When A.J. Brown plays, they score 30 points a game.
Right.
Because you can't account for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and then also stop Saquon Barkley, and then account for Jalen Hurts as a runner. They're so multifaceted offensively. They give you so many options to try to – that's what the NFL is right now. So we talked about this at the beginning of the year, if you remember. This was something that Mel Kiper Jr. brought up, and you asked me about. Teams are playing too high safety with man coverage underneath, trying to allow the 4-man rush to get home. And that too high safety has kept the numbers down. So what teams are trying to do, and you saw the Ravens – go after a wide receiver. The Steelers bring in a wide receiver. Other teams, the Washington brought in a cornerback. You're either trying to find one-on-one matchups you can exploit through talent, formation variation, tempo, anything you can. The Eagles have it. They can exploit a lot of one-on-one matchups. Right. Teams have a very difficult time trying to figure out who to cover.
Right.
It's a big problem. When A.J. Brown's, you cannot single cover A.J. Brown with a corner. You're wasting your time. He's too strong, too big, too fast, too tough. Catches everything. Right. So you have to occupy 2 people on A.J. Brown. You have to occupy another person just to make sure Jalen Hurts doesn't leak out as a runner.
Right.
And then you have to make sure you're tackling Saquon Barkley. It's a heavy lift. It's a very heavy lift.
And Sal, I want to point out that this is a team, Washington, which I don't want to say now they're not vastly improved. They clearly are. This kid's going to be a special quarterback. I believe that too. But you can't escape the notion that Washington's 7 wins have come against teams with a combined record of 21-37. It includes the Giants twice, Cleveland, Carolina, Chicago. I'm not sure Washington is totally ready yet for prime time. Do you see Jaden Daniels being able to navigate a Vic Fangio defense?
Well, and I think you're right, Pat. I think A, they played a weaker schedule. B, they struggled against Chicago, had to beat them with a Hail Mary.
Right.
And then they lost to Pittsburgh at home. So, as I said at the top, I think they're trending in the wrong direction in certain key areas that don't match up well against the Eagles. And one of them is the way this defense of Vic Fangio is playing. Pat, I sent you the numbers right before you went on the air. Number 53, Zach Bond, is the best linebacker in the NFL right now. He's the highest graded linebacker 3 weeks in a row, the last 3 weeks by Pro Football Focus.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened in an Eagles uniform since before Andy Reid became the head coach.
Yeah. That was a great free agent pickup there. He had 8 tackles last week, 1 for a loss. Got to give we're going to front office some credit for that hiring.
Oh, yeah. Look at what Howie Roseman did. He hit big on Zach Bond.
Yep.
He hit big on Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
He drafted Mitchell out of Toledo,
who
never was an off-the-ball corner at Toledo, then drafts Cooper DeJean, who's made all the difference in the Fangio defense.
You're right.
I mean,
that's an A+.
Howie Roseman's, to me right now, has got to be executive of the year in the National Football League. I think.
Yeah, that's an A+. You're right about that. But
go on the Eagles. I would write all of your viewers, after the show is over, of course, go on the Eagles website and look at something the Eagles put out each week called Bird's Eye View. I sent it to you, Pat. You know what? Better yet, Pat, why don't you put it on your social media, on your X account?
All right.
And people should go on Pat's X account and look at Bird's Eye View and look at the numbers that are historic by Zach Bond and this Eagles defense during this 5-game stretch. It's amazing.
All right. Appreciate that. Sal, let's take a quick look around the league. Xander, could you bring up that schedule for
Pat, I am your executive producer. You realize that.
Well, I'm just asking my producer to do something. I'm not the exec now. But if you bring that up, Xander, thanks very much. Sal, 2 games I want to get your comments on, in addition to the game you're traveling to, which I think it's interesting. It's kind of a last stand for the Bears now. They're down to 5-5, and they're leaking some oil. And it'd be interesting to see if the Packers can get their offense going. But first, talk to me about Kansas City and Buffalo. It's a late Sunday game. The Bills have to be lying in wait for this game. Kansas City comes in at 9-0. How do you see it?
Well, I see it as a must-win for the Bills. You're home. The odds makers say you're going to win the game. It's -135 for the Chiefs. So I think, to me, you got to win the game. You're home in the middle of the year, and it took a blocked field goal for Kansas City to beat the Broncos at home in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So if I'll say this: if Josh Allen does not turn the ball over, the Bills will win. They have enough firepower to do that. They do.
It's funny you mentioned too, because if they don't win it, then that's it. They're out for the number 1 seed. Kansas City's schedule, Sal, just looking at it.
Yeah.
After this game, they're at Carolina, home to Vegas, home to the Chargers, at Cleveland. So I mean, there are not many losses. The only other loss that it might be is that they're home to Houston and then they're at Pittsburgh. Not easy games. But this is Buffalo's last stand. I agree with you. If they want any chance of not having to go through Arrowhead, this is it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said last week on your show, somebody's got to beat the Chiefs. And boy, the Broncos came close. But this is the game. When you look at that schedule, they could easily run the table. And if they only have to play 1 game at Arrowhead in order to get to the championship game,
that's not right.
Their ticket is punched to New Orleans. I mean, I don't see who do you see going in there and beating them? Maybe the Steelers. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Steelers, Sal, the 7-2 Steelers host the 7-3 Ravens Sunday. This is it for now. I'm not saying this. I shouldn't say this is it for the Steelers, but this is the marquee game that they come off with a lot of momentum now, having beaten Washington. The Ravens at 7-3 really. Their pass defense last week, Sal, against Cincinnati was like Hall of Fame bad. But Pittsburgh doesn't really win that way. How do you see this game?
Here's an interesting number for you. As an underdog against the Baltimore Ravens, Mike Tomlin has won 5 straight. How about that?
Yeah.
I think the Steelers have enough offense to disrupt a very poor pass defense of the Ravens. The game is about matchups.
Yeah.
And something that you and I just talked about in this segment. Teams are trying to create one-on-one matchups that they can exploit, either through talent or speed or design or formation variation, whatever it is. That's why the Steelers went and got Mike Williams. He's a tough one-on-one player, despite what happened with him with the New York Jets. He's always been tough. If he's healthy, he's tall, rangy, long arms, great hands.
Yeah.
I've always seen him run good routes.
Yeah.
The Steelers stole that guy. I mean, he scored the winning touchdown.
He sure did. That's right.
And you already have Pickens, and you have Freiermuth, who's an excellent.
He is. He's an underrated tight end. I agree with you. And a good run game. Sal, what strikes me too, and this statistically wise, is the Steelers in one less game have given up 107 fewer points than the Ravens. The Ravens are giving up 25 points a game. Very odd to see it with a John Harbaugh coach team.
Back to the Eagles, by the way, on this 5-game win streak, Pat,
they
have outgained their opponents by 900 yards.
That might be why they're on a 5-game win streak, huh? Wow, that's 180 yards a game. They're outgaining their opponents.
Well, you could tell you were a CFO. You came up with that number like that. That was impressive, Pat.
Yeah.
I would have had to get my calculator out. I'm not going to lie.
That is impressive as all hell, Sal.
Yeah, I think it's actually 899, but we're going to round up.
We're going to round up. That's what we do. That's what we do. We round up. How about that? So anyway, a few good games this week, including your game, I think is going to be a slugfest. So see if the Packers could get it going. Packers offensively, Sal.
Important game for the Packers, right? Important. I mean, if they have any shot, I mean, you look at who's going to make it in the NFC. The Packers right now, as it happens, the Eagles would play the Packers. The Packers would come into the link in the first round.
Yeah. I'm not sold though.
That's the reason why they sent me to Brazil, Pat, for a preview of the playoffs.
I'm not sold on the Packers at 6-3. I got to see a better effort from that offense. So you'll be there up close and personal. We'll talk about it next week. Sal, I appreciate you spending all this time. Congratulations again on Friday night. Enjoy yourself there, and look forward very much to talking to you again next week. Have a safe trip. All right. All right, Sal Paolantonio. Thanks very much again. All right. We get back, a colleague of Sal's is going to join us, the excellent John Keim, who's been covering the Commanders or the Redskins since 2013, actually, with ESPN, and he's covered that team since 1994. So there's nothing going on with that franchise that John Keim doesn't know about. We'll talk about their approach to this big game Thursday night when we get back on This Week in Pro Football.
Welcome to Park Bank, a return to better banking. With 7 locations across Philadelphia and South Jersey, we prioritize your financial well-being with a blend of modern amenities and traditional customer service. Our professional team is dedicated to providing tailored banking solutions, whether you are opening your first account, planning for retirement, or expanding your business. Our services include a wide range of personal and business banking options with competitive deposit rates and products. We are committed to making your banking experience seamless and efficient with the latest technology at your fingertips and the personalized support you deserve. Park Bank, your bank, your community. For more information, go to parkbank.com. That's Park, P-A-R-K-E, bank.com. Member FDIC. Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated is the concrete cutting specialist in the Philadelphia area since 1995, and they've become the specialist in the Pittsburgh area as well. These guys are celebrating 28 years as the industry leader in the field of concrete cutting and robotic demolition. So if you have a project that requires any type of concrete cutting or drilling, concrete demolition, or interior excavating, call the specialist, Concrete Cutting Systems, located at 2514 Orthodox Street in the heart of Philly. Call them at 215-533-0652. With a fleet of over 70 service trucks, Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated is always ready to service all of your concrete cutting, drilling, and concrete demolition and highway sealing needs. These guys are the only full union concrete cutting company based in Philadelphia. So don't delay. Call the boys today at 215-533-0652. And be sure to check them out on Facebook and Instagram at CCSINC_Phila or on the web at concretecuttingsystems.net.
All right, back here on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Park Bank. Thank you very much for joining me on this special edition. Part of the reason why it's so special is because this gentleman is joining us. As I mentioned, John Keim has been with ESPN since 2013. He's covered the Redskins and Commanders since 1994. So he's literally the Sonny Jurgensen of that outfit right now. So John Keim, thanks very much for joining me.
Always have fun coming on here, Pat. Thanks for having me on.
All right, John, thanks. Appreciate that. All right, John, it's a big game. It's not, and I'll tell you what, it's nice to see, even though we're based here in Philly, but as an old football guy and a guy who remembers going back to Sonny Jurgensen, it's nice to see the Commanders back in the mix. How excited has the city been by the return to prominence of this once great franchise?
Oh, I think they're very excited. And the excitement started last year, and I think you're probably going to get into this a little bit, but after Josh Harris bought the team, to purge themselves of Dan Snyder started everything. Right. So like there was a level of excitement for that, but then it was a reality on the field. And then this year now they're winning, new everything, right? Everything is new. And then you have Jaden Daniels. So Jaden, the winning plus having a young quarterback that they feel can be the guy for years, I think has really added to that excitement that, hey, whatever happens this year, you win 10, 11 games, whatever it is, you got your quarterback. That I think doubles the excitement for them.
John,
Pat, you're right. Like the league it's going to be, the NFC East is a great division, right? Always has been. Anybody who's an old time football guy has to love the NFC East. So when it's just more fun when it's not just two teams at the top all the time.
John, the franchise's last NFC championship appearance was in 1991. We always ride Dallas for the fact they haven't been there since 94, but it's been even worse for Washington. Mm-hmm. So just staying on that for just a second, Josh Harris takes over the team from Dan Snyder, and in a seemingly miraculous way between Harris, Jason Wright. How did they do it? Was it simply Jaden Daniels, or what else did they put in place? And
it really is. It's like Jason Wright is really not a big part of this anymore. He's not even the team president anymore. So he's more just a senior advisor. And throughout this transition, it's really been Josh Harris and his group, right? There's minority owners and just, he's got his people. Magic Johnson's a part of that. Bob Myers, basketball guy, was a part of that. Rick Spielman, former GM, was a part of that decision-making group. Well, the first big move he did was to bring in Adam Peters from the 49ers to be their general manager. So that was the big first step. And he was, I think you go back to the excitement, I think the fan base got excited because they knew he was the GM that most people would want, right? And on the open market. And this team got him. And it's like, when was the last time something like that happened here? And so that was the first step. And then the hiring of Dan Quinn was the next step. And what this franchise needed as much as anything was energy and just a mindset overturn. And Dan Quinn has provided that. So so I think that like those moves and then drafting Jaden Daniels, but those moves were the key.
All right. Quinn was a gutsy pick, though, and I think it's worked out extremely well. The players seem to have rallied around him. So things looking up in Washington. Now we get to this game Thursday night, John. And let me just hit you with this right off, skeptic that I am, I guess. I was talking with Sal Paolantonio earlier about the fact that Washington, in their 7 wins, have only beaten one team, Arizona, with a winning record. Do you think the Commanders are ready for this intense spotlight Thursday night against a hated divisional rival?
Well, yeah, that's true. I would also say the Eagles are kind of in the same position, aren't they? Because like the records of the teams that they've beaten is not very good either. And so I think these teams, and I think the difference is the Eagles have a history prior to this year playing to that level. But in terms of the opponents they've beaten this year, it's about equivalent, right? So, and I think, when they've this team, the Arizona, is the one team that has a winning record right now that they've beaten. They beat them bad on the road. So yeah, their record has been built on that for sure. But I would say that in those games, part of the difference, Pat, this year for them is that they've handled their business in those games.
Yeah.
So they've played, they played bad teams in the past that they didn't beat.
That's right. You got it right. You got it right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think like that's a big part of it. And the Browns, they beat the Browns bad. They beat the Cardinals bad on the road. They beat Carolina bad. The one bad team they can never beat bad is the New York Giants. Yeah. But I think they'd almost throw a parade here this year for sweeping the Giants because they always have trouble against them.
That's right.
That's the confounding thing about it. But
yeah.
Pat, what I would say is, yes, they've beaten those bad teams. But I would also say, like in the past, they didn't always do that, or they wouldn't play consistently. So I think one of the things that's kind of been a hallmark for this team this year is how they've responded to situations. So you go on the road, the first game you lose, you come back home, you win, right? You have a Monday night game and a game at Arizona, Monday night game at Cincinnati, then Arizona, you go out and sweep it. So like they've handled each situation pretty well, which is why I think they're in this position. And and listen, here's the other part. After this game, guess who they play? They play Dallas and then Tennessee. So, and before they get their bye. So you got two more of those. And they have to feast on those games.
I agree. And then they're at New Orleans after the bye. So the path is clearly there for Washington to be there come January. So we'll see if they can do it. This game, John, I'm looking at the Commanders. They're fourth in total offense, 377 yards per game. And they've had a good running game. But this Brian Robinson just cannot seemingly stay healthy. What is his status for the game Thursday night?
So he will play Thursday, but you're right. Like he's missed 3 games already this year, 2 with a hamstring, and he's coming off a hamstring injury. Now, of course, he says he feels great. They all, I think they all do. Yeah. But that has been a problem. And the 2 games he's missed, or 2 of the 3 games he missed, were Baltimore and Pittsburgh games where they really could have used a tough, rugged runner. So it's a big return for them to get him in there because they don't really have a proven down and down back like him when he's not there. They have Austin Eckler, who's a good third down back. They have Jeremy McNichols, who is with his 11th franchise. So it's not ideal without him, and it just gives them more options, and it gives teams something else to worry about when Jaden Daniels wants to run the zone read, right? You can't focus on Jaden. You got to focus here. He's a good, tough runner, and it's very good for them to have him back because I think without him, it would be very tough for them in this game.
Talking with John Keim from ESPN in Washington, a gentleman who's covered the Commanders since 1994. John, when the Eagles have the ball, that is daunting for any defense. You've got Jalen Hurts now, who is seemingly rounding himself back into his 22 form, and you've got a guy, probably the top free agent signing of 2024 was the Eagles bagging Saquon Barkley. So how is Washington preparing defensively? Who's the one guy out of those 2 that they are really focused on shutting down?
Well, and they're going to be very quiet about that. But I would say, here's the problem, Pat. So in other games, first of all, I think with the Eagles, you've got to stop Saquon Barkley because if you don't stop him, it's a wrap to me. Now the problem is I say that, and then, the ideal situation would be is force Jalen Hurts to beat you with his arm. Well, we know he can do that, but we also know that when he has to throw more, he's more prone to mistakes. The problem is there are big plays that'll go there too. So, and I don't think that, so I say that you got to stop Saquon Barkley, but then you have mismatches on the outside. If you went to, like, say you go to a single high safety look, you got man or zone on the outside with cover 3. You're in trouble against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith with their corners. So I start out by saying this team struggled to stop the run all year. I just think if you don't stop Saquon Barkley, it's going to be – and it seems like the Eagles have really kind of relied on him lately to power this offense and then play off that with Jalen in the arm. Right. And it's been successful. Yeah. So if so I would say you need to make Jalen Hurts beat you with his arm, and it's not a knock on Jalen Hurts. It's just that I think they have no chance if they don't stop Saquon Barkley.
One notable thing, John, I got a couple minutes left with you here, is Washington, when they have the ball, do they have enough at receiver besides Terry McLaurin?
Well, I think that's debatable, right? Now, I will say Noah Brown's been a good pickup, and he replaced basically Jahan Dotson, who hasn't done a lot in Philly.
No, he's been buried on the Eagles bench.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of talent there. So do they have a consistent guy there? No, but Noah Brown can hurt you. And the way Cliff Kingsbury's offense has been, they've schemed them open, and Jaden Daniels is not afraid to take a shot down the field. That's a really good secondary that the Eagles have, and you know that. And that's why, I really like the Quinyon Mitchell. I mean, he's really good. But they have good, Cooper DeJean, and then obviously Slay.
Yeah.
But that will be a challenge. But I think the scheme oftentimes has been getting guys open, and Noah Brown is really good at making contested catches. So he does help. And I think the other guys, you got Ertz, people know him there, still chugging along, and then Austin Eckler, and but I think Cliff Kingsbury as a coordinator has done a good job creating space for some of these guys, and they just have to take advantage, because that's going to be a tough secondary to go against. That's why Brian Robinson is so big in this game.
Yeah, I agree with that, certainly. And I tell you, McLaurin's a hell of a receiver. He's one of those guys, one of the most underrated receivers in the league. He just doesn't get a lot of publicity. Let's face it, the Commanders have not been had a habit of being on Sunday Night Football recently.
No, they have not. They have not. And the other thing is, Pat, that he finally has a quarterback that he can grow and develop, that he really likes playing with, who's giving him a shot. So McLaurin is on pace for career highs and all sorts of things, but I think a lot of it is because of Jaden Daniels.
I agree. And the comparisons to Daniels and Robert Griffin years ago, but I sure wish Daniels more success. Griffin, it's unfortunate what happened to Robert Griffin, but Daniels, I think he's the real deal. Most people do think he's the real deal if he stays healthy. All right, John, how do you see this game playing out, John? Give me your thoughts on it. How tough is it going to be? Washington usually plays well in Philadelphia. How tough is it going to be for them to pull a W out here?
Very tough, and they do play well, and I think they respond well to adverse situations. So they're coming off a very tough loss against Pittsburgh, very physical game, tough road game in Philadelphia. It's hard. I like the mindset of the Commanders. It's hard to go against the Eagles in this one for me, because that offense is just so difficult to go against, and I'm not sure this defense is at a point where they can handle that. Yeah, all right. And I think that's the difference. So I could go like a 27-23, 27-24 type Eagles win. It's fun to go watch fun football in that stadium. It's a great atmosphere, as you know. So
the host of the John Keim Report, where do you find that, John? Is there a particular site or something that people
Sure, yeah. It's part of Empire Media, and that's AMPIRE, and it's the podcast with Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. But on YouTube, it's part of Empire Media.
All right. And everybody check out John Keim's stuff on ESPN. It's always top notch. And John, I certainly appreciate you taking the time. Maybe I'll drag you back here one more time when the Eagles travel down to DC. All right.
Fantastic. Always enjoy it, Pat. Thank you.
All right, John Keim. Thank you very much, pal. Appreciate it. The great John Keim there. And who's greater, really, to have on next than Bill Reinhard, the man who has just rewritten copy for most advertising in this country now. And look forward to talking to Bill, of course, about some starts and sits. Boy, that was an ugly week last week. It was an ugly week for me. I can tell. I'll tell Billy Reinhard right off the shake. I went into that Monday night game with Stafford and Kyron Williams, just needing to have a decent day, and I've been all right. And God almighty, the Rams stunk. But we'll do all that next with Bill Reinhard. We'll talk fantasy football and your Week 11 starts and sits on this special edition of This Week in Pro Football.
What on earth are you doing? We have dinner reservations in 15 minutes.
I'm trying to figure out who to start in my fantasy football lineup. Every website I check has a different opinion. It's driving me crazy. How do you set your lineup so fast?
I have a secret weapon that will blow your mind.
Wow. What's the secret?
I've been using FantasyGuru.com for all of my fantasy football decisions.
FantasyGuru.com? Isn't that with that crazy guy, Jeff Mans?
You mean the legendary fantasy guru, Jeff Mans? He's a genius. FantasyGuru.com has everything you need to dominate your league. Starts, sits, busts. It's like having a fantasy football expert panel in your corner.
Wow, FantasyGuru.com. But I feel like you're cheating on me.
How do you think I won our league last year? FantasyGuru.com. It'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Join FantasyGuru.com today. Use the code NEW30 for 30% off instant savings.
Evolution Energy Partners has helped hundreds of businesses save millions of dollars on their energy spend. They offer electricity and gas procurement strategies, efficiency audits and engineering and financing solutions, as well as online utility bill management. To learn how your business can save, visit www.evolutionep.com or contact Chuck Herschella at 610-329-8288. Evolution Energy Partners, energy solutions to improve your bottom line.
At Whistler Pearlstein LLP, we assemble the most effective team to handle all of your legal needs. There are players and pretenders, but our hustle and heart set us apart. In practice now for over 75 years, we're proud to be one of the most prominent full-service law firms in the Philadelphia region. We offer 17 different areas of practice, including business, corporate, and tax education law, real estate, zoning, and land development, municipal law, and litigation. Our top-rated attorneys and staff are laser-focused on client success. We strive to provide outstanding legal counsel with the highest level of care and consideration. Let us show you the Whistler way. Learn more at WhistlerPearlstein.com or email Michael J. O'Donohue at mod@whistpearl.com, WhistlerPearlstein.com, or mod@whistpearl.com.
Welcome back. This week in pro football, Pat Callahan here, previewing the Eagles and the Commanders Thursday night. And, of course, a couple other big games, as I said, on that schedule. But let's segue a little bit here to some fantasy football and bring this gentleman on, Bill Reinhard, FantasyGuru.com and the New York Daily News. Bill, of course, happens conveniently to not be a New York Giant or a New York Jet fan. Good for you, Bill.
Oh, man.
I'm going to have Gary Myers on in just a few minutes and talk about really those two franchises. They cannot, Bill, get out of their own way. They just, I mean, the Giants go out, they're going to play Carolina. And thankfully, I played Tyrone Tracy, who I picked up on the waiver wire.
Right.
But, I mean, what is with this team? I mean, they were down 17-7 almost in the fourth quarter.
I know. It's really to me, it's the play calling, too. I mean, they choose not to run the ball. They put the game in the hands of Daniel Jones, who really is not capable of winning a game by himself. I was listening to the game on the radio with my brother driving, and I was almost driving off the road because I'm like, why aren't they just running the ball? Tracy was ripping off huge chunks of yards. I don't understand it. And now they got to bench Jones so he doesn't get injured and they don't have to pay his $23 million
that's what's
next
going to
year.
happen. You know that.
Yeah.
And you know, and the other thing, too, is the coach going to want to do that? Because I don't care what assurances. Sal Paolantonio said the same thing to me earlier in the show. He doesn't care what assurances Mara made on his behalf. There is no way Brian Daboll's the coach of his team after this year. At least I don't see it. You?
That's interesting. See, obviously he came from Buffalo, and I loved him as a coordinator, but he certainly hasn't done it as a coach. He's like the Rex Ryan guy. They're geniuses at offense or defense, but when you put them in charge, they don't look after the minutia, the false starts, the missed plays, the 2-point conversion they screwed up a few games ago. It's the little things, and calling that flea flicker, I mean, just little things like that I think it's too much for a head coach. They're great coordinators, but when they become a head coach, you've elevated them to the level of their incompetence. How's that?
There you go. Look at you, pal. Look at you. Going a little Peter principle on us right there.
Just a bit.
All right, Bill, the other thing I want to mention about last week, too, is I was just screaming at the TV. I had Justin Jefferson of Minnesota.
I know. You texted me.
It was absolutely brutal. And Jacksonville was obviously double covering him. And then I'm thinking to myself about the Thursday night game where Jamar Chase wasn't even single coverage. What were the Ravens doing in that game with Jamar Chase?
even explain the holes in their defense and how they weren't people 5 yards with him within Chase. I couldn't, and I was going against Chase and Burrow that night. So
okay, good night. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
But I just don't know. I mean, are the Ravens real? I mean, we knew they were, and I said to start Burrow because you always start, your quarterbacks against the Bengals, which is why you should start Justin Herbert this weekend. But I'm sorry, the Ravens. But they were so open. I just can't wrap my head around it. I don't have any explanation for it.
But it wasn't a funny week though, Bill, because the fact is that after the Thursday night game, they had to be the 3 best fantasy performances were Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Jamar Chase. And no one else came close, I think, on Sunday. It was a terrible day, Sunday and Monday.
It really was. And, you looked at the stats and you look at all the scores across the board on all the fantasy leagues. They're scoring in the low hundreds, and usually it's like a 150 or 160. But, like, everyone was winning like 109 to 108, 107. It was just not a high-scoring week except for those few guys that first day.
Talking with Bill Reinhard from FantasyGuru.com and the New York Daily News. Bill, how about Jared Goff throws 5 picks and wins? You don't see that very often out of the Lions team, but Lions still getting it done. But all right, let me stay on this theme though of bad fantasy football. There are 4 teams, I think, Bill, that have really underperformed. All season long from a fantasy perspective, and that's Green Bay, the Rams, who just drove me crazy Monday night, Miami, which might be getting its act together but hasn't so far, and the 49ers, who struggled to win that game against Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Looking at week 11, you see any of those teams maybe busting out?
The problem is I see the running backs doing well on all 4 teams, and that's not necessarily going to lead to a lot of points or busting out for anybody for the quarterbacks. Jordan Love, he had 5 touchdowns last year against the Bears, but the Bears secondary is much improved this year, and I think they're going to attack on the ground there. And I'd stay away from any Green Bay wide receiver. I give up. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I give up there. You can start Kupp and Puka, and they're going to get their 7 or 8 catches for 80 yards and hopefully a touchdown. But I don't see any big bust out there. Deebo Samuel is interesting because he had a couple of touchdowns. He had a touchdown in both games last year against Seattle. So maybe he turns on. But as far as, the 4 touchdown, 350-yard game from Purdy, certainly not from Tua, I don't see it happening this weekend. I really don't.
How about the Debo throwing? He literally threw a punch at the long snapper of the 49ers on the sideline. Nothing happens. I don't know. I don't know.
And I don't know, was that really directed at Moody or was it directed
I don't know. It was a big swing. That was a big left hook he was throwing there.
And I haven't read anything about it since.
No, not a thing about it. But it's something to look at, like fantasy standings, and see Bo Nix 4 spots ahead of Jordan Love, 3 spots ahead of Patrick Mahomes. Let's talk about those 2 big games, including the one in your backyard there, Buffalo hosting Kansas City. Now, I guess you never know when Josh Allen's actually going to hand the ball off. You just don't know. Right. But are you liking Buffalo's running game this weekend against Kansas City? Not an easy team to score against.
Very hard to score against. They rarely give up more than 2 touchdowns. The nice thing about the Bills is they can handle the Chiefs. First of all, they always play them tough. Right, that's a given. And they have tended to beat Kansas City in the regular season. All right, it's the 4:25 game. It's in Buffalo. I don't believe Kansas City is going to go undefeated this year. So if there's a spot for them to lose, I think it's here. But I think you're going to see Josh Allen take a lot more risks running the ball himself. Amari Cooper's banged up. They already ruled out Coleman. I don't think the tight end Kincaid's going to play. I mean, they're a mess. So between Cook and Josh Allen and Mac Hollins, who I like a lot, I see this. I see Josh Allen putting this game on his back and trying to score 3 touchdowns and keeping the Bill.
I'll tell you what, there's worse guys to put on a back than Josh Allen.
That is true.
He is one of the best quarterbacks. He's just I've never seen anything like him. When he rolls out, and it looks like he's at 6 inches from out of bounds, and he throws a 45-yard dime.
Right?
Mac Hollins. Hey, I tell you, the guy is astounding as a quarterback, but that's a tough matchup. But like I was talking with Sal Pao about earlier, this is it for Buffalo. If they want any chance of avoiding going to Arrowhead to get to the Super Bowl, they have to win this game, right?
You're 100% right. And the timing's right. It's going to be, kind of cold. It's going to be in Buffalo. The fans will be behind him, and I think they're favored by 1.5 right now.
All right, Bill Reinhard, before I let you go, give me some Week 11 starts and that you think guys who you think maybe on the periphery you might be due for a decent game.
Right. Well, I said, to start Herbert against the Bengals. Some people probably haven't started him much this year, but the Bengals D is just as bad as the Ravens D, which is the point I was trying to make earlier.
Right.
Nick Chubb, if he's going to get a 100-yard game this year, it's going to be against the Saints. They've already given up 4 100-yard games. I can see that. And I like the wide receiver for Cleveland, Tillman. So he was the number 1 receiver in fantasy from week 7 to 9. All right. But here's the thing with Tillman. If you start him, don't look at his stats until the fourth quarter. Because that's when the Browns will be behind. The Saints will be in the prevent defense, and Tillman will start racking up his points.
I'll tell you who else you got to look at, I think, is George Pickens of Pittsburgh. I mean, he's going against that Raven D. I mean, if this is ever a day when Pickens is going to put up 130 yards and maybe 1 or 2 TDs, this is it, right?
He's been terrific. And that catch last week, are you kidding me? That was just an unbelievable catch. And Russell Wilson, too, is, that guy, he is absolutely one of the steals of the draft. If you took him and you had the patience to keep him on your team, he could lead you to a fantasy championship. They're that good, and the secondaries in that AFC division are that bad. So keep those 2 guys in mind. I have one special sit for you, Pat, and you're gracing the pages of the New York Daily News tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I said to quote my good friend Pat Callahan from This Week in Pro Football, Geno Smith is starting to look like Geno Smith. So do not start him against the 49ers.
I am going to mention that. I think you're right. I think the sun is setting in Seattle right now. So
you'll see next year Daniel Jones will be in Seattle. It'll be his turn.
All right, Bill Reinhard, where does everybody find you this weekend so they can get out of their fantasy hole, which I'm heading into right now?
So my daily news column again comes out tomorrow morning with my starts and sits. My fantasyguru.com column comes out as well. This week I did a column on steals of the draft, which actually Chuba Hubbard and Darnell Mooney, those 2 guys taken in the 15th, 16th rounds are just tearing it up and doing well. And then Twitter on NFL Fantasy Bill.
All right. Excellent. NFL Fantasy Bill it is. Please, everybody, check Bill out. I drive him crazy all weekend.
I love you.
He might get to your tweets after mine, but I do appreciate all the effort, Bill. Thanks very much for joining me.
Go Bills.
All right. Bill Reinhard joining me there. Thanks very much to him. All right, when we get back, we're going to try. It's a little sad part of This Week in Pro Football for this week. We talk about 3 franchises that just are absolutely sliding into the abyss, and no better guy to talk about those franchises with than a guy who's covered New York and Dallas football probably better than anyone else, and that's Gary Myers. We'll do that next on a special edition of This Week in Pro Football.
Somewhere on the blue planet lies a hidden gem, nestled in the heart of lush greenery, where the game of golf takes on a new meaning. At Spring Mill Country Club, we offer an unparalleled golfing experience. Our meticulously maintained course is designed to challenge and delight golfers of all levels. But that's not all. Spring Mill is also the perfect venue for your most cherished celebrations. From intimate gatherings to grand weddings, our elegant banquet facilities provide the perfect backdrop for your special day. With exquisite cuisine, personalized service, and breathtaking surroundings, every event at Spring Mill becomes a cherished memory. Let us be a part of your journey, whether it's a round of golf, a celebration, or a once-in-a-lifetime wedding. Spring Mill Country Club, where every moment is extraordinary. Visit us today and create your unforgettable story.
Welcome back. We've got another exciting play underway at KennedyAuto.com.
That's right. At KennedyAuto.com, you can browse their entire inventory from home.
The customer is scrolling hundreds of Ford, Mazda, and Subaru vehicles right at his fingertips.
He made his selection and got a bottom line price set directly to his email. He could go all the way.
And the deal is good, all without leaving his couch. Incredible. KennedyAuto.com. Enjoy your ride.
Johnny Apple's restaurant and bar opened in 2001 and for over 20 years has been serving great food and good times to Bucks County residents, friends, and family. Ideally located at 184 Buck Road in Holland, Johnny Apple's offers a terrific array of steaks, seafood, and daily specials. They also host private parties and affairs of any size. For excellent food, great company, and a relaxed lunch or dinner, check out Johnny Apple's restaurant at 215-953-9900 or at johnnyapplesrestaurant.com.
All right, back here this week in pro football for a special edition here, previewing Eagles Commanders on Thursday Night Football, but also looking around the National Football League at both the good and the bad. And it's time to get to the bad. And I'm not referring to this gentleman, longtime football author, the author of Once a Giant. Great book, and a great Christmas gift for anybody who covets or follows the NFC East. And, of course, a guy who covered the New York Giants for the New York Daily News for many years and the Cowboys for the Dallas Morning News, Gary Myers. Gary, how are you, pal?
Pat, how you doing? It's kind of an ominous introduction when you say we got to talk about the bad, so here's Gary Myers.
Well, I know that. I know you've got kind of an Undertaker role for this show, Gary, and I appreciate you doing that. But I just can't help it. You're the perfect guy to talk about three teams, two of which certainly, Gary, have just been shocking in the way they've descended into the lower levels of the NFL. But I want to start with the other one, and that is the Big Blue, the New York Football Giants. You and I have talked about this for years now in the Daniel Jones era, that it just has not worked. And I think it was at the bottom, Gary, last week when they play an eminently beatable Carolina Panthers team and fall behind 17-7 into the fourth quarter and lose 20-17. Where do they go from here?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. A few weeks ago, John Mara at an event in New York City, it was actually the premiere of a documentary NFL Films did about his dad, Wellington, gave the dreaded vote of confidence to Joe Shane, the general manager, and Brian Daboll, the coach, saying no changes during the season, and he didn't anticipate making any changes after the season. And of course, the Giants have not won a game since then, and losing in Munich to, you say, an eminently beatable Carolina team. I'd say a horrendously awful Carolina team. I mean, and all the talk in New York was, well, if the Giants lose this game, all hell's going to break loose. And it really hasn't, just in terms of, there's still not going to be any changes during the season, but there now seems to be a lot of questions whether John Mara and Steve Tisch will make changes after the year. They're 3 years into this Shane Daboll regime. They made the playoffs, won a playoff game in their first year, and have gone just totally backwards ever since. So the Giants after the season certainly will be looking for a new quarterback. They should have drafted one this year. I said at the time, I think they should have taken J.J. McCarthy instead of Malik Neighbors. And now next year's quarterback draft is not considered anywhere in the level of what it was like this year. And so the Giants, they could have drafted into the strength of the draft if they'd taken a quarterback this year. And now they're going to be drafting into the weakness of the draft in 2025, which seems very typical of things that have happened to them ever since they won their last Super Bowl.
Well, there you go. There's a good segue, because I was just about to ask you that. Since the 2011 Super Bowl season, Gary, the Giants are a shocking 78-128. Okay, and that's 50 games below 500. One playoff appearance. This is a very proud franchise, one that has 4 of those trophies sitting on their mantelpiece, and was throughout the 90s, 80s, and 90s even, and into the first decade of this century, was a powerful force in both the NFC East and the NFL. How do they get out of this kind of a hole? And then the comparison I'll give you is Washington where bang, that the owner goes and in comes Josh Harris, and they seemingly now have it turned around. Is it just a matter of finding a Jaden Daniels?
Well, yeah, I think that's what it's all about. You can't win without a quarterback. Now, it does take more than a quarterback, because I thought that Eli Manning was more than capable in the first 5-6 years after that last championship. But the draft became, just horrendous is the word to use. They couldn't build an offensive line. The only real skill position player they gave was Odell Beckham, who turned out to be a complete knucklehead, and they had to get rid of him. So it does take more than the quarterback, but it starts with the quarterback. And the Giants realize that. They tried really hard to move up in the draft. But when you think about the teams that were at the very top, Chicago was locked in on getting rid of Justin Fields, which they did, and taking Caleb Williams.
Right.
Washington, even if they didn't need a quarterback, was certainly not going to trade the pick to the Giants in the division so they can get their franchise quarterback. And so they really centered on trying to get New England's pick, because it seemed that New England was a little, on the fence about Drake May, and they couldn't convince the Patriots to make that deal. And then when the Giants are picking 6, they could have taken J.J. McCarthy or traded down to get him, or Michael Penix. But instead, they decided to stick it out with Daniel Jones for at least another year. Right. So that's where it's got to change. They did identify the fact that 1 year into Jones's contract, they made a huge mistake, but they couldn't rectify it because they won too. The guy who really cost them the chance of getting a quarterback was Tommy DeVito. He was a fun story last year. Tommy Cutlets and everything, but he won 3 games.
Yeah.
Take away those 3 games, and the 2 times they beat Washington last year, and they would have been picking second.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to point out to you, Pat, is that ultimately I blame this all on Justin Fields, because if Justin Fields turned out to be a franchise quarterback, and they actually got him with a pick,
I know what you're saying,
by the Giants.
That's right.
Then Chicago would have been more than willing to trade the pick, just like they had a year ago. With Carolina, they could have cashed in again. Right. That pick turned out to be first, but because they wanted to get rid of Fields, they took Williams, which shut the Giants out of one of the top 3 quarterbacks.
All right. Well, that's it. That's a tough story for the Giants. You're right. They're going to have to find their Jaden Daniels. So that's not an easy thing to do. The Commanders can attest to that because they've been in the same wilderness. Now let's go down the hall, Gary, up there in exit 16W in New Jersey, to a team which is 42-97 in the last 8.5 seasons, 6 playoff appearances in 25 years, 1 Super Bowl in 58 years. They thought they had it fixed, Gary. They obviously don't. What has gone wrong with Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets?
Well, the key stat here is they haven't made the playoffs since 2010, which is the longest stretch of failing to make the playoffs of any team in the 4 major sports. Boy. And that was after back-to-back AFC championship game appearances.
With Rex Ryan, right.
Right. They haven't made the playoffs, and this is now going to be, 14 seasons?
14 seasons, yeah.
Yeah. Listen, they thought they had it fixed, as you say, because they got Aaron Rodgers. But if you look back, and I think everybody's kind of overlooked this, the final game of Rodgers' career in Green Bay was a Sunday night game in 2022. They were playing the Lions. The Lions had been eliminated from the playoffs earlier in the day when Seattle lost. So all Green Bay had to do at home was beat a Lions team that you figured did not have tremendous motivation. And Rodgers was horrendous. I keep using that word, horrendous. Yeah. He was terrible in that game. And then the Jets traded for him. He gets hurt on the 4th play of the season in 2023. Now he's already turned 40. He's going to be 41 in a couple of weeks. He comes back in September, having not played really. If you want to just eliminate the opening game of the 2023 season, he hadn't played in a year and a half.
Right.
And he's played like a guy who was completely rusty and his skill set is diminished, and that he's playing like he's 40 years old. Tom Brady was an aberration, Pat. That's why this never happened before. It's not going to happen again. A guy that age, playing at that level. And Rodgers just looks shot to me.
Yeah.
And he actually said today I'll just clue you in on this in case you haven't read it, that, he probably wants to play next year. But the Jets might have a new general manager because Joe Douglas's contract is up. They have an interim head coach. So you don't even know who's going to be making decisions. Woody Johnson could possibly wind up in Donald Trump's cabinet again, or not cabinet, as an ambassador, going back to London. But he'll be making all these decisions before he heads out of town, if that indeed happens. So Roger's saying he wants to play next year. Well, fine, but for what team? Because we don't even know if the Jets want him back.
How about that? Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame the Jets look like they got to start, but they have a lot of talent. There's talent on that team.
There is a lot of young
and it's just amazing how they just have absolutely that game last week. You talk about the Giants game. That performance in Arizona was a disaster for the Jets, a death blow to their season. 31.
Well, they've lost 3 games this year because of the kicker, and they refused to cut him. They just put him on injured reserve.
No, that was convenient. All right, Gary, one other team I want you to expound on, a guy who spent a number of years with the Dallas Morning News, and that is another just shocking descent, was the Dallas Cowboys. And they were on this slide before Dak Prescott sustained that hamstring injury. Last week, they were god-awful against Philadelphia. Cooper Rush was even worse than people thought Cooper Rush was going to be. Dallas seems, Gary, like they also might be in for a serious rebuild. Give me your thoughts on the 3-6 Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Cowboys were overrated going into the season, but I didn't think they were this bad. They get blown out at home every time they got a game at that stadium.
I know.
I mean, I don't know what the numbers add up.
Yeah.
It's just starting with that Green Bay playoff game, which was a disgrace, the way they lost to the Packers. Every one of their home games hasn't been close. Now, we talked about this last year. We might have even mentioned earlier in the year. I am shocked that Jerry Jones didn't fire Mike McCarthy after last season.
Yeah.
I know that he kept winning 12 games in the regular season, but he couldn't even get to the division. I mean, to a conference championship game. Or even did they get to a divisional round with McCarthy? I don't know if they won a playoff game with McCarthy. I
don't think the Cowboys. I don't think so. Remember, they lost to San Francisco.
They lost to Green Bay. They lost to.
I don't.
Well, no, you know what? They beat Tampa in Brady's last game.
That's right. They did. You're right.
Right, and they lost at San Francisco.
Right.
The next week. I thought for sure he would hire Belichick after last season. It seemed to be a perfect match. I'd be really surprised if he doesn't hire him this time around.
All right. Well,
the reason he kept McCarthy was that he didn't have to pay him off. He only had 1 year to go on his contract.
Well, Gary, the name you just mentioned, I had written down here anyway, because he also has ties to the New York Jets now, who have an interim coach. Bill was coach of the Jets for about 8 minutes. Many years ago. You don't see any way.
No. Yeah. There is genuine hatred on Belichick's part for the Jets, for the way it ended with the Jets when Steve Gutman, the former president, after Bill resigned, was questioning his mental health, basically. Okay. And then the Jets are the team that turned him in on Spygate. Too much has happened between the two, and Bill has absolutely no use for Woody Johnson.
What about the other New York team?
Well, that's the more relevant issue is first of all, will they fire Dable? And 2, would John Mara, who is fond of Belichick, reach out to him and hire him? Now, I don't think any team is going to want to give Bill complete control, because I think he proved that without Brady, his warts in the draft or his shortcomings in the draft were all exposed when he didn't have Brady to cover up for him. But if you connect the dots here, Joe Shane worked for Parcells in Miami. And I know that Shane considers Parcells a mentor. Parcells and Belichick are probably closer today than they've ever been. So if it comes down to Belichick saying to Parcells, can I work with this guy, Joe Shane? I think Parcells would give him positive feedback.
Yeah.
Well, I think that could work. And all Bill wants to do is come in and coach. He wants to pass Don Shula, needs 15 victories to do it. And just as important, he wants to prove he can win a Super Bowl without Belichick, without Brady, because the whole narrative changed and who gets the credit in New England once Brady won without him.
Right. He's not going to, but he's not going to win the Super Bowl with Daniel Jones. It'll be interesting to see.
No.
Yeah, you can look at Belichick and see he's bored stiff now with the Manning cast. I think he wants to get back onto a sideline, but
no question.
I don't know if there's any help. I think it'd be interesting to see what he does. Does he lean Dallas because Prescott assumingly will be back, but the Giants got to solve that quarterback problem.
Well, Pat, if the Giants get the first or second pick in the draft, and Bill is studying the quarterbacks right now.
Right.
If he actually likes one of them, thinks that he can win with them pretty quickly, then the Giants have some talent. I mean, they still have a long way to go, but he's not taking the job here without a quarterback. He's not going through what he went through in New England the last few years and walking into a situation.
I agree. Absolutely right. And I tell you, it's the way of the NFL right now, Gary. It's the way of the NFL. We just talked about the Commanders. All right, Gary Myers, the Once a Giant tour is still going on. Right? And the book's been a big success. You got another one that you're working on. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually hits on the subject we're just talking about. It's Brady versus Belichick. Who gets the credit? Who deserves the credit? And I'm really excited about this. I'm in the middle of writing it now. I have some really interesting stuff in this book, and I think it's going to come out. I think that the date is September 2nd next year. So right around the start of the 25 season.
Right around the start of the season. You timed that pretty good.
Yeah, you're right. And when I fully anticipate that Belichick will be coaching somewhere next year when the book comes out. So that'll be good timing for the book as well.
All right. Well, I look forward to that very much, Gary. I look forward to having you back real soon again. And I promise we'll have something much more exciting and upbeat to talk about.
Listen, I want to tell you this. In all the years I covered the NFL, I've found there's two really great stories to cover. One is when you have a team that's in Super Bowl contention all year because the fans are really all excited about it. And the other is when the team really stinks because there's a lot of good stories that come out of it because usually there's changes and dissension. And I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. So the stories that are going on in New York right now, to me, are fascinating. Both teams could be looking for a new coach. Both teams could be looking for a new general manager. And both teams are going to be potentially, at least one of them, the Giants for sure, and maybe the Jets as well, looking for a new quarterback. I mean, when you're covering stuff like that, that's fun.
Yeah.
I think
that is fun for the guys covering. Not so much fun for the fans, but
can I tell you one other thing? I looked this up because I thought we might get into this. That since the Cowboys, and we touched on this a couple of times ago when I was on, but I looked at the numbers. Since the Cowboys last made it to the NFC Championship game, which was 1995, which was also the last time they were in and won a Super Bowl, 26 of the other 31 teams have been to a conference championship game since the Cowboys were last there.
Wow.
18 of the 31 other teams have been to a Super Bowl since the Cowboys were last there. The only teams in the NFC that have not been to a conference championship game since 95 are Dallas, Washington, and Detroit.
Yeah, how about that? But one thing I'll guarantee you, Gary, next year, when the NFL releases its TV schedule, the Cowboys will have 5 primetime games. I guarantee you. It doesn't matter. They will have 5 primetime games.
Yeah. Let me just correct myself there for a second. Cross Detroit off that list because they got there last season to the conference championship game. So it's just Dallas and Washington.
How about that? Two of the most storied franchises in the NFL. So, all right, Gary Myers, thanks a lot for taking the time, pal. I appreciate it and look forward to having you back real soon. I promise we'll talk about something better. And great to hear about the book. We'll look for that.
Well, thank you. And I'm looking forward to the Commanders-Eagles game tomorrow night. I think that's going to be a fascinating game.
A good game, but I don't know how good a game. I think it's going to be that's a big step up for Washington versus the teams they've played so far this season. So we'll see if they could do it.
Yeah.
All right, Gary. Thanks very much, pal.
Take care, Pat. Good to see you.
All right. Thanks. Xander, you want to bring this gentleman on right here? We'll wrap up the show with a talk about some picks and props, and that would be Justin Mark from SGPN and the old-fashioned, oh God almighty, the old-fashioned football podcast. Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
All All right, Justin. I know you're a whiskey guy. I
Yeah.
know you're as expert in whiskey as you are in, and I'll tell you, that is one impressive record you got so far this year. So what do I have? 90 and 54 or something, I think, so far this year.
Yeah, I don't have the top of my head, but I've definitely been battling to stay on that winning side by far.
Yeah, you've been battling, all right. I think you got that one. But just tell me what particular pour pairs well with the Chicago Bears offense.
Yeah, so I'm glad you kind of told me that this could be a question, because this took a lot of thought. And when things take a lot of thought, what I do is I ask the smartest person in my household. That's also my co-host on the podcast, my wife. And she said it's got to be something that like is a great brand name but lets you down, because I mean the Bears have Caleb Williams, they have DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, they got the weapons, but it always lets you down. So I thought about that, and this might be controversial to any whiskey fans. Blanton's, it's a very sought after whiskey in the whiskey market, but it's way overpriced. I mean, it's hard to find it under $120 to $200. It should be priced around 60 or 70. It's not a bad whiskey, but it lets you down for that price. I want us to be more unique, like Savage and Cook Bloody Butcher. This is something made in Vallejo, California. It's unique. It has a ton of character and flavor, and that's what I want the Bears to do. Be unique. Don't do the same thing everybody else is doing.
I understand. You want the Bears to be bloody butchers. I understand that, Justin, but so far it's not working. I just wonder if that Hail Mary didn't set the Bears off into a team concussion for 2 weeks, because offensively they've got nothing. Now they got the Packers coming in. I was talking to Sal Paolantonio about that game, and the Packers offense has not been impressive at all. I guess let me ask you about that game then. Green Bay, Chicago. I'm going a little bit off script here, but do you immediately grab the under in that game, Justin?
It's not a bad play, though. I worry that just the way these games tend to go, that Green Bay shows up and blows us out. There's something about the Packers that the Bears can't get over the mental game of it, right? Even on paper, when we should win, they don't. So, yeah, I'm a little nervous about it, but I do think the under as well, because both defense have been playing pretty good.
All right. I made an allusion to your record so far this year because it is impressive, and I mentioned it to Sean Green a couple times. What kind of tells do you see just in making picks every week? Is there a certain first domino you look for in terms of one team visiting another?
I wish there was a secret sauce that I could kind of share with everybody, but when it comes down to it, I'm literally a gut handicapper.
Are you?
I look at the teams and I go with my gut. The Chiefs-Broncos game last week is a perfect example. A lot of people telling me Chiefs are going to blow them out. Broncos aren't really that good. But if you look at their defense, I thought if the Broncos defense can just slow them, they're going to be in this game. And that's exactly what they did to get the cover. I didn't feel good about Broncos money line, but I felt great that they could stay within that 8.5. And so a lot of times I'm looking, can the defense take out the offense's best weapon? And if they can, and they're the underdog, I think they can cover. If they can't, and then they're the underdog, I think they're going to get blown out.
How about that? Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because last week, the bettors, the public, had for the last couple of weeks been dipping into the Sharps treasuries there, to the houses treasuries. And then last week, it reversed totally. And if it hadn't been for that blocked field goal, I think the Chiefs just get all the money, and the money line parlays were about to get blown up until the Chiefs blocked that field goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird to see all the luck continue to fall on a team, isn't it? The Chiefs,
isn't it though?
They seem to continue to get lucky.
Yeah, but don't winning teams make their own luck though? I was talking with Sal about that at the outset of the show. Like, Detroit had no business winning that game against Houston. Houston was clearly the better team that night. 5 interceptions, Jared Goff. I wake up the next morning, Lions win. I just think good teams do what they have to do to win games. And the converse, Justin, is that teams who don't know about themselves yet. Houston's an example. Atlanta goes in and somehow they lose to the Saints. Come on. You just can't do that if you're going to be taken seriously, right?
Yeah, absolutely agree. It seemed like a classic letdown spot for the Falcons there. The Saints coming off the loss to the Panthers. They had to show up. They had to show up and win. That was one where I looked at it and it's like, Falcons should win this, but can Saints really afford to lose it? And so them winning it, that made sense. But I agree with you. The Falcons, they should have won that game theoretically.
No doubt. Nothing even theoretical about it. They should have done it. And the Falcons now 6-4. They could have been 7-3 and in the race for a home playoff game. But okay. Week 11. Give me some. Obviously, we're a Philadelphia-based show. Commanders, Eagles. Just give me a couple props and who you like in this game against the spread.
Yeah, so I mean, I like the Eagles to win this. I was listening to you before and say like this is a big step up in competition for the Commanders. I agree with that. The Eagles, they're used to winning, right? This is kind of new for the Commanders recently. So while I think it's going to be a good game, I think the Eagles definitely have the edge here. One of my favorite props, Barkley over 109.5 rush receiving yards. That's at -114. He's hit it 7 and 9 times this year, and they haven't adjusted the number all that much. Earlier in the year, you were seeing this around 101.5. Then it crept up to 104.5. 10 yards for Barkley, whether it's rushing or receiving, is not that much, because when he's going over those 7 times, he's going over it by a lot. It's not like, oh, he's barely there.
I've noticed too, Justin, that Saquon is playing like he literally got a get out of jail free card when he left New York. I mean, I think he's probably seems to me to be the happiest player in the NFL this year, having gotten out of New York and now playing for a contender in Philadelphia. All right, is there anything else you like in this game?
I like Ertz under 34.5 receiving yards. He hasn't hit it in the last 2 games, and the Eagles are actually 5th for receiving yards allowed to tight ends. And then it's hard not to take the over on A.J. Brown's yards. I mean, last year he put up 305 yards and 4 touchdowns in the 2 games. He's a beast. A.J. Brown's one of the best in the game. And while they could adjust, I mean, DJ Moore had a huge game against the Commanders last year, didn't this year. So they could adjust to it. They've gotten a little better, but I don't think they have the defensive weapons to cover them all.
And I like A.J. Brown too. He's due, right? I mean, I don't know. It's all happenstance, but he is due for a 120-yard, 2-touchdown game. It could be against the Commanders. 2 other games, Justin, I wanted to get your input on here, talking with Justin Mark from SGPN and the Old Fashioned Football Podcast. Incidentally, where do people find that podcast, Justin?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Just type in Old Fashioned Football Podcast. You'll see our logo, which is a glass of whiskey with football ice cubes in it. Hard to miss.
Very clever, Pat. Very clever. Let's talk about KC Buffalo. It's the one of 2 marquee games of this week. I've been talking about this all night. That it's really Buffalo's one and only chance to have a shot at hosting Kansas City come January. Who do you like here?
This is a tough one. I think because of the emotions that go into losing a close or winning a close game like KC just did, versus Buffalo just had an easy time, I kind of like Buffalo to steal this one. They have to, right? They have much more to lose than Kansas City does. So I'm taking Buffalo. But some props that I like are on KC's side. I think that Mahomes, 240.5 passing yards. I think he goes over that. He has the past 3 games when that passing game is kind of coming more together with Hopkins. Travis Kelce's getting more involved, and Juju Smith-Schuster, who's been an up and down player for him, but he is back and he knows the system. I also really like Travis Kelce over the 6.5 catches. I mean, he's finally, as a fantasy manager and big into fantasy football, who drafted him in a lot of leagues, it's like finally we're getting the production that we wanted.
Right. Yeah. All right. And then the other game, Justin, that I wanted to get your opinion on, the marquee game, Baltimore at 7-3 travels to 7-2 Pittsburgh. Justin, I was commenting earlier, I've never seen a pass defense as bad as what the Ravens are tossing out there. They're giving up 26 points a game, which to me is shocking for a horrible coach team. They seemingly don't know what they're doing. Now, Pittsburgh's strong point is not throwing the ball. All right, so what gives here in this game, in your opinion?
Yeah, this is kind of my betting 101 in my book anyways. You back Mike Tomlin as a home dog. You have to. Ravens also haven't been great in these divisional matchups. I mean, we saw them just a couple of weeks ago lose a game to the Browns that they never should have lost. These divisional matchups, they kind of slip a little bit. So I'm all over the Pittsburgh money line here. Tomlin is a home dog. You fade him as a favorite. You back him as a dog.
All right, Justin Mark, I appreciate you stepping in here, taking the time here. Sean Green, very important, man. You never know when you can grab him or not. But it's the Old Fashioned Football Podcast. I want everybody to check that out on YouTube and check this guy out on SGPN, because he is right. Talk about Justin Mark, a hell of a lot more than he's wrong. So everybody give him a check out. And Justin, thanks for taking the time, pal.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Justin, thanks very much. All right, that'll do it for this edition of This Week in Pro Football. Thanks to Xander Krause for hanging out all this time, and thanks to everybody who came on the show tonight. Thanks to you for watching. I think Philadelphia wins this game. I'd be very surprised. Now, Washington plays the Eagles tough in Philadelphia, but I just don't know if Washington's ready yet for the glare or the kind of spotlight they're going to see. I think Saquon has a big night. I think A.J. Brown has a big night. I think the Eagles win. We'll check it all out, and then we'll talk to you about it next week and the Week 12 schedule when we rejoin you on This Week in Pro Football. Good night.